Hello everybody, I'm David Carless and I work in the University of Hong Kong, and in this short video I'm going to talk about a paper which appeared in ELTJ volume 62-4, which came out in September 2008, and the paper is entitled Student Use of the Mother Tongue in the Task-Based Classroom. And I want to start with a question for you. Have you ever set up a learning activity in a classroom where you put the students into a pair or into groups and you wanted them to carry out some kind of task in English, and have you then been disappointed that they carried out the task mainly through the mother tongue, or some of the groups resorted to the mother tongue more than you expected or more than you hoped for? I think many of us have experienced this kind of phenomenon, and often we find it a bit frustrating. We design the task for them to practice the use of the target language, but they revert to the mother tongue. And this is the sort of perennial issue I'm trying to tackle in this paper, and to revisit this sort of classic issue in the context of task-based language teaching, particularly with respect to Hong Kong, the context in which I'm working, but also hoping that the findings will carry resonance for other contexts, particularly EFL context. So the first point perhaps is that yes, using the mother tongue in such a task may be a bit frustrating for some teachers, but perhaps also to give a balanced view of this issue, in that it can also have positive impacts in terms of the students talking about what's going on through the mother tongue, trying to negotiate meaning, maybe perhaps trying to make some interpretations about language. So in the paper I'm trying to give a balanced view of mother tongue use, and not just to make it out to be a barrier that needs to be overcome. Okay? Just in terms of a little bit of contextualization, I've been working in Hong Kong now for around 20 years, and for the last 15 years or so I've been working with teachers on and off in preparing them for task-based language teaching, doing research and doing collaborative work with teachers in terms of task-based language teaching. And one of the issues they frequently raised has been this challenge of getting students to use the target language rather than reverting to the mother tongue. And basically that's what I'm going to be talking about today. The data for this study draws on an interview study with 10 teachers and 10 teacher educators, all based in Hong Kong. Perhaps as a preliminary commentary on that, I should say that I firmly believe in the importance and value of classroom-based research and school-based research. When we actually go into the classroom, we can find out really what is going on, what are the teachers doing. So this kind of research I value very much, and much of my previous writing about task-based language teaching has been based on classroom data. But for this research, on the other hand, I simply used interviews, as I said, with 10 teachers and with 10 teacher educators, because I felt that interview study could give quite a rich perspective on both teachers and teacher educators' views of the issues in the implementation of task-based language teaching. And that's been particularly my focus over the last 10 years or so in terms of my research, is how can task-based language teaching be implemented in the classroom? What are the challenges teachers and students face, and how might these be overcome? Now in Hong Kong we have quite a bit of expertise on task-based language teaching. We have some of the academics who've published a lot on TBLT, and they can provide their perspectives from a teacher education point of view, from a research point of view, from an academic point of view. And then we also have a lot of teachers who've got experience of trying to carry out task-based language teaching in the classroom. So I felt the context in which I'm working was a very favourable one for carrying out this piece of research. Okay, I'll move on now to a little bit of the findings from the paper, and I hope I can provide enough of a flavour for you to maybe want to consult the original source in ELTJ. So the informants were aware that the mother tongue could be a useful resource for promoting L2 learning among students, but they were also concerned that it could be a barrier if there was too much use of the mother tongue. And the informants for the study reported a number of strategies that they either used themselves or they'd seen other teachers using, strategies for trying to minimize the negative reversion to the mother tongue. The first strategy is to do with scaffolding. In other words, if the teacher is able to provide sufficient support for the students, then they're less likely to flounder and to revert to the mother tongue. So things like visual displays, skillful use of the pre-task stage of the task cycle, ways in which the students could be supported so that they have the kind of language that they need to carry out the task. So that was one strategy for encouraging target language use. A second strategy reported in the paper, and some of you may feel this is a rather crude strategy, was the teacher walking around the classroom and monitoring the students, encouraging them not to revert to the mother tongue. But one of the teachers reported that as soon as their back was turned, then the students would go back to the mother tongue. So perhaps an improvement on this strategy, as reported by another teacher, was the idea of making the students themselves in their pair or group responsible for using the target language. So the idea of a language monitor, someone helping the group or helping the pair themselves to focus on trying to stick to the target language as far as possible and not to revert to the mother tongue. Another strategy for addressing the issue of strengthening the target language use and reducing mother tongue overuse was the issue of task design. The way the task is designed is going to impact on the kind of interactions that the students use. So one suggestion was that whilst group work is a useful part of the task-based repertoire, sometimes group work can be overused, or sometimes in a school context it may be difficult to control the groups, and in a group maybe they're even more likely to revert to the mother tongue. So pair work was often felt to be a more practical and manageable and feasible strategy. A pair rather than a group of 5 or 6 could be more effective. Another element of task design was the notion of individual tasks, that yes, we often do pair and group tasks, but sometimes individual tasks may also be useful. Writing tasks, reading tasks, different kind of tasks that involve different modes of interaction. Jigsaw reading might be another example. A structured jigsaw reading task might be a useful way of discouraging students from reverting to the mother tongue. So those are some of the issues and some of the strategies in terms of trying to enhance mother tongue, to enhance target language use and reduce mother tongue in the school classroom. Following from that, I want to move on to some issues in terms of methodology and some of the challenges for methodology and the methodology of task-based language teaching. And one of the informants for the study mentioned the interesting paradox that the more fascinating and absorbing the task is, the more likely the students are to revert to the mother tongue. Maybe they are focusing particularly on task completion because it's an absorbing task, and then the most efficient way they can complete the task is through the mother tongue, and that may defeat some of the linguistic purposes of the study. And the informant who referred to this paradox particularly emphasized the issue of the post-task focus on form. And in some of my other recent writing, particularly my article in System in 2007, I talk about the issue of the post-task and perhaps how sometimes the post-task is neglected in school context for various reasons. And the point about post-task focus on form is that it can be used to push or to encourage the students to use the target language in the interaction of the task, because if they don't use the target language, then it makes the post-task focus on form less productive or almost redundant. A second issue in terms of methodology is following from some of Martin Bygate's work, particularly in the area of task repetition. And one of the informants mentioned the notion that task repetition can be very useful for enhancing the quantity of the target language. So in each iteration of the task, students may be encouraged or supported to use less of the mother tongue and more of the target language. And I suppose another issue in terms of task repetition is that with each iteration of the task, fluency, accuracy and complexity may also be developed further. So task repetition, another element of the methodology of task-based teaching that could be of relevance here. And another issue for methodology relates to professional development of teachers. Some of the informants reported that sometimes teachers were not so skillful in setting up the task, in preparing the students for the task, and that they needed professional development in a number of the areas to support the successful implementation of task-based teaching and learning. And some of the strategies that may support the professional development of teachers would include the modelling of successful task-based teaching, maybe team teaching, pairs of teachers, or an expert teacher and a less experienced teacher working together in the enhancement of carrying out task-based activities. And a lot of this support needs to be in school, in the classroom, a school-based kind of support network that can enhance professional development of teachers. Okay, so moving to some conclusions in the study, I just want to finish up with 5 points that I elaborate in conclusion to the paper. So what I'm trying to do is to give a balanced view of the issue of mother tongue use. And the use of the mother tongue in the classroom is a very natural process for students. It's a humanistic one, it's a learner-centered one, but if overused, it risks meaning that the students are not getting enough opportunity to actually use the target language and to experiment with the language in the way that we would probably most wish for. So I'm calling for a balanced and flexible view of the mother tongue issue. And in terms of some issues that require further investigation, it seems to me that we need to have more research into the kind of tasks where mother tongue use could actually be a positive resource. And I'm thinking possibly in terms of some grammar analysis kind of tasks. For example, consciousness-raising tasks when we're asking the students to analyze language and to think about the way the English language is put together. And in those kind of tasks, maybe the use of the mother tongue might actually be quite beneficial. They may also be able to make some contrastive analyses between their own mother tongue and English, and to form some hypotheses that may be helpful in terms of the development of their grammatical understanding. A third issue in the conclusion is in terms of task design. I referred to that issue briefly earlier, but perhaps the more tightly structured the task, the clearer the scaffolding of the target language input can be. And it may be that these kind of tasks, particularly in school context or particularly with beginner students, may be successful in terms of a more focused target language use. Because as we know, sometimes students will revert to the mother tongue because they're not quite sure what to do in the task or they lack the language. Then the fourth issue in terms of conclusions from the study that I'd like to address is the issue of the modes of interaction in the task. Now obviously in task-based language teaching, oral tasks are an important part of our repertoire. But one wonders if sometimes they seem to be a little bit emphasized in the task-based literature, and that there are different modes. So yes, we want to have oral tasks, but can we also have a balanced diet of integrated tasks, reading and writing tasks, maybe writing tasks on their own? And this might well integrate very well with the kinds of needs and realities of schooling. Schooling often revolves to some extent around reading and writing, the nature of exams. Certain contexts, reading and writing tasks perhaps be emphasized a bit more than they are at the moment. And as I mentioned earlier, jigsaw reading, paired writing tasks could easily be very useful strategies to add to the repertoire of the task-based teacher. So just finally, I'd like to make the traditional call for further research, and that we need more recognition, reporting and theorizing of how the mother tongue can be a positive resource in the task-based and in other communicative language classrooms. and in particular what kind of cognitive functions are best brought out through the mother tongue. And then I call finally for more empirical data from schools which can illustrate some of the constructive use of the mother tongue. So just in summary, what I've tried to do in this short video, and what I do a little bit more elaborately in the paper, is to summarize some of the issues in terms of mother tongue use, to report some of the strategies, to suggest some avenues for further research, and to argue basically for a balanced view of mother tongue use, that it can have some positive cognitive functions, it can be humanistic, it can help the learners to engage with the target language, but if overused it may become a barrier. Thank you very much.